Welcome back. Welcome again to another episode of Route 139. We're going to continue with part 2 on domestic violence, and we have with us His Grace Bishop Yusuf of the Coptic Orthodox Diocese of the Southern United States. Welcome again, Sayyidina, and please let's continue the discussion, the conversation about domestic violence. We're going to think about the perpetrators and the victims and the different kinds of domestic violence, because that could be husband and wife, could be mother and children, father and children, and so forth. And we also want to welcome with us our guests, Eva and Tina, and they're going to join in the conversation about this very serious topic, but we're also going to think about some potential to overcome some of these issues and find some solutions to break these cycles. Welcome, Your Grace.
Welcome.
Your Grace, last episode we spoke a little bit. We were just about to touch on a few solutions. I know that Your Grace is offering 4 premarital programs throughout the year in the diocese in various locations. That is definitely a solution, and maybe Your Grace can enlighten us with some of the messages that these young couples, are just entering into marriage. And we talked a little bit about how can this cycle be broken. Even Tina had some wonderful comments about, what is perpetuating it. So what is perpetuating these issues, and how can we discipline, and how can the church as the group of servants also participate in being proactive and reteaching some of this negative behavior?
I think we need first to differentiate between discipline and abuse or violence. This differentiation is very, very important, because for many parents, they say, I'm just disciplining my son, and if I don't discipline him, he will not be a good person. So what is the line between if this discipline or if this violence and abuse? Number one, actually, discipline should be constructive and should have a goal. But punishment or violence is venting my anger. I am angry, so actually I'm venting my anger. So I say I discipline my son, but actually it is venting my anger against my son. I remember when we were serving a Sunday school servants, they told us, if you are angry from within, don't discipline any of your Sunday school students. You need actually to have peace within and calm. So when actually you make any discipline, it will come actually from a peaceful heart, not from an angry heart. Number 2, about discipline versus violence or abuse. Anything actually that put my son or my daughter down, or puts the other down, my spouse, anything that put him down or humiliating him, this is not discipline. This is abuse. But actually, discipline, it can be verbal abuse, it can be spiritual abuse, it can be financial abuse, it can be physical abuse. There are several kinds of abuse. And what I mean by spiritual abuse, when I use actually verses from the Bible to humiliate my son or my daughter. Some parents actually, they use the Bible actually to manipulate them, to make them feel guilty, to put them down. And that's what we call spiritual abuse. And no wonder, because even Satan in the temptation on the mountain, he used the verse from Psalm 90 to tempt the Lord. So Satan can actually use verses from the Bible and puts it in my mind in order to spiritually abuse my son or my daughter or my spouse. That's why we need actually to differentiate. Anything make the other feel humiliated or down or put him down, this is actually not discipline. For example, if my son made a mistake, I can talk to him. I can talk to him in a firm way, assertively, and tell him, here are your choices, either for time out or, to stay in your room for certain time, or certain privileges will be taken from him, and I should actually give him the time of punishment For example, this will end after 1 day, 2 days, or whatever. And I explained to him why I'm doing this, and this actually for his benefit. And actually, if he show and demonstrated good behavior and remorse, maybe I can not continue with the discipline.
So it's okay for parents to say, okay, I was going to, discipline you for 3 days, but I appreciate your expression of remorse, so I'm going to reduce
yes,
that. I don't have
and
to
maybe this can be
yes.
said in the beginning. Actually, if I see you demonstrating remorse, actually the 3 days can be cut down into 2 days or even 1 day, to encourage children actually to improve their behavior.
That is such a wonderful point, because a lot of times, it's like my word. If I said it, now I have to stick to it, even if everything seems to be resolved afterwards. And it's interesting. I never thought of that, of people using the Bible as a weapon rather than a shield and as a defense and an armor. It's used as a weapon, which doesn't sit well with us. And Your Grace also mentioned how discipline is important, and there's that distinction where disciple comes from discipline, discipline from disciple. So, that I can't imagine Christ treating his disciples in an abusive manner if he wanted to discipline them.
I like that point a lot too, comparing it to the disciples, because when you say that if I'm going to discipline my child and I'm going to make sure to use my word and I'm never going to go back in my word, it's about me.
That's true.
It's not about them. And I think the abusive person, the person who does abuse, they don't know that. It's all about their pride, what they're going to feel after, or the anger that's inside of them. But when I think about the disciples, when Christ has sent them, the apostles, to us, it was never about them. It was about Christ who was in them. It was always about the message. And they would not have gone throughout the world from the end of it to the other if it was about them. They would have just sat and waited for people to come so they can look good and their pride would look good. But we forget that. I mean, as a mother, I forget that sometimes. If it's discipline, it's about me. It's how I look as an authoritative figure in front of my children or the person in front of me. But I think that's a really good point.
And the other one too that I learned from having a toddler is even to teach them about discipline and all that is you yourself. For example, if I was out of anger, I yelled, then I learn her that I will apologize. And I get to her level and I say, I'm sorry, I yelled. And that way actually it's a form of discipline as well. So she would know if she did something wrong herself without me punishing her or getting ready to give her the look or something like that, like as some parents, all of us can do, they will come themselves and say, Mommy, I'm sorry I did that. So that's a way of them teaching them recognizing the mistakes they do.
And you're also modeling it too.
Also,
And so
yeah.
that in itself is a powerful lesson. Your Grace, can you tell us a little bit more about what can we do? For example, I'm thinking maybe in Sunday school that there could be components in the curriculum maybe for some role play. It doesn't have to be only Sunday school, but in some of the other activities for some role play, so that this is what it can look like, or maybe this is what it should not look like, so that they also have that visual learning of, because if all that they're seeing, for example, is a lot of abuse and loud screaming and so forth, then again that's all that they know and that's what they're going to seek, and then the cycle is going to repeat itself. But maybe as a visual, if we do some more role plays, some more hands-on kinds of things, rather than having the children maybe as passive learners just hearing a lesson, but how can we apply something like this, see the kindness that somebody like Boaz shows Ruth, for example, and the tenderness and the compassion and so forth, if that's the lesson that they're studying. So maybe we can take any lesson that is presented and so forth. And if Your Grace can also tell us a little bit more about the premarital programs.
Adding such an important topic to Sunday school curriculum or VBS, Vacation Bible School, actually will enlighten the children or ask them to do some research or making some role play or whatever to demonstrate how to show compassion and how to show tenderness towards the other. This is very important. But I think we need actually to address a very important point. What does a child do if he is exposed to abuse? What are the proper measures? Because here we are teaching him this is wrong. Right. This should not happen. But how actually to teach a child or to respond to abusive behavior from maybe his big brother, his friends, or sometimes from parents. I'm sorry to say this. How a spouse should respond to abuse. And I think here, teaching them how to be able to say no, and how to be able to be assertive, not aggressive, how to be able to set boundaries, how to be able to not to allow anybody to take advantage of them. This is very, very important. And I see many times this teaching is lacking, how to be able to set boundaries and to be assertive. And maybe we say it, just be assertive, say no to the abuse, but they don't know how to do it. So again, maybe here the idea of role play can teach them if they are in a certain situation, how they can respond and what are the words they can choose without aggression, but just to be assertive. And the support system here, whether it is godly friends, whether church, whether Sunday school servants, Abuna, will be very, very important in teaching children or spouses or youth assertiveness, but not aggression. Because they say a demon cannot cast out a demon or cast away a demon. So the demon of aggression cannot cast away the demon of abuse. Demon cannot cast away a demon. But actually, as St. Paul said, don't repay evil for evil, but repay evil with good. And I'm sure maybe some of the people who are watching us, they will question, but where endurance come? Where forgiveness come? You know, the Bible teaches us, blessed are you when they revile you, persecute you, say all evil against you falsely for my sake. So when all of this come, how can I apply all of this? Actually, number one, I need to learn how to set a boundary. And after this, actually, I learn how to endure. Because endurance can be out of weakness or out of a forgiving heart. But if I am applying endurance because I cannot set a boundary, I cannot say no to the abuse, this is not endurance, that's weakness. And God did not give us a spirit of weakness, but He gave us a spirit of might. So, for example, the Lord Jesus Christ, one time during the trial, He said, "Why do you slap me?" He set a boundary here. So He was strong enough to be able to set a boundary. But after the trial is over, actually they slapped Him and they were mocking Him, saying, prophesy, who slapped you? But He endured all of this for our sake. So here we can see that the Lord Jesus Christ, when He wanted to set a boundary, He was able to set a boundary. And when He decided to endure, He accepted endure. So we don't confuse these things together. And forgiveness, it doesn't mean if I set a boundary that I don't forgive him. Actually, I forgive him, but I need actually to set a boundary so he cannot take advantage of me. And actually, I'm setting a boundary for his spiritual life in order actually not to add sin over a sin in his life.
And forgiveness doesn't mean that you're approving of the wrong. It's that you're forgiving, that you're letting go of that pain that was inflicted on you. But it doesn't mean that it is, that you're approving of.
But I see Sayedna answered a question that was on my mind in a very perfect order. but I still have the question lingering. Which priority, if you're telling that child that's being abused in a class, and you're telling him, Habibi, this is, you're going to learn to set priorities. But as the priority of the church, I'm supposed to tell him to love your enemy first. I'm supposed to tell him you don't give evil by evil. And I'm supposed to tell him, if that person does that to you, please don't hate them back. But as servants or as the church, that's our priority. So I guess my question, which one do you do?
And there is no contradiction between this and that. Because your question sounds as if love your enemy contradict, being assertive. Of course, I don't agree to hit them back. That's why I differentiate between being assertive and being aggressive. Hitting back, that's aggression. But being assertive, we can need to teach them, I see your point, but I'm not happy that you used this word. Please don't call me this name. So here he's using the word please, and he forgive them, and he still love them. And he can show love in action. As St. Paul said, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If your enemy is thirsty, give him a drink. I understand many times it's challenging to say this, for example, to a parent. But believe me, maybe during the time of aggression or being angry, maybe we cannot communicate this. But after everybody calms down, I think children, if they go kindly to their parents and speak to them, most of the parents, they love their children. So if they spoke to them kindly, I'm sure they can move the heart of their children, their parents, and the parents will respond to this. And I hear many stories how actually children, say comments to the parents that correct their behavior, the behavior of the parents.
Right. I know, Sayedna, we're running short on time, but just a quick question that we can discuss on the next episode about kids feeling guilty when they get abused, being blamed, that they feel like I did this, therefore I deserve the beating. So maybe that's something we can discuss in later episodes.
God willing, next time we'll discuss. Thank
Well, I
you.
want to thank you all, Your Grace, Eva, and Tina. And we will continue with this very important question about blame and where does the blame begin and where does it end. We ask you to join us again on another episode of Route 139.